Today's daf is daf Ayin Beis, and we're up to Tashma at the beginning of the Amud, and we're trying to determine whether Gerushin is like Hakama in the fact that he could have been made for his Nedarim as long as he was married to her. Once he divorces her, he removes his ability to be made for her Nedarim, and that, in a sense, that implicit or tacit declaration that he's giving up on the possibility of being made for the Nedarim, that itself constitutes Hakama. That was one side of the Gemara. Tashma me'emasai amru in the Nar Marasa meis baila nisrokna reshus la'av. Under what circumstance do we say that with the death of the husband, the late husband's rights to be made for the Nedarim are transferred over to the father? Now he himself, the father, as a sole effort, can be made for the Nedarim, and there are three possible scenarios in which this would happen, and we apply the principle of nisrokna reshus la'av. Number one, bisman shelo shama Baal. The Baal did not hear about the neder during his lifetime before he died. Oh, perhaps shama v'heter, or he was meter. Oh, shama v'shazak umeis bo bayom. So the Gemara now analyzes. Iyamar gerushin kishtika damya. If you're going to tell me that gerushin does not constitute a hakama, but rather it's like shtika. He wasn't mefer, he wasn't making. So it's just status quo. It's then listening. Nami, why didn't the brisa, in the reisha of the brisa, in the enumeration of all the scenarios in which we apply the principle of nisrokna, why did it omit this case? It should have said, oh, shtama v'gerish, or if the husband heard about the neder, he knew about the neder, he divorced her on that day, that too would lend itself to nisrokna. Umidalo tariach, since the Bryce omitted it, shmami, no, we should derive the gerushin kakomadami. That the opposite is true. Had he divorced his wife instead of dying, then that would constitute a hakama, and therefore the father would not be able to be made for the neder had after the hakama of the Baal, and there's no nisrokna. So the Gemara says that's an excellent diuk from the Reisha, but we're going to come to the opposite diuk, the opposite conclusion from the Sefer. Eva Sefer, im shama v'kiyim, o shama v'shatzak, u'meis b'yom shel achra, so the entire day of Yom Shamo passed, and therefore the neder is mekuyam, is aim, the father cannot, yochol l'hafer, he cannot be made for the neder of his daughter after the death of her husband. But you had proved from the Reisha that the Gerushin is a tacit hakama, therefore Tzchalas hakama is listening amongst the situations in which there's no nisrokna, it should have said him shama v'gerish. From the absence of that in the Brayso, Shmami, we should derive the opposite conclusion that gerushin is kishsika dami, and since it has the status of shasika, therefore, not being hakama, it would be with the death of the husband nisrokna reshus. El mihol lekal amashmana. We have diukim sosru, contradictory diukim in the Brayso from the Reisha to the Sefer, and therefore we don't know which is the correct part of the Brayso as far as deriving the conclusions one way or the other about whether gerushin is ka'akoma from the Reisha or gerushin is kishtika from the Sefer. However, the Gemara adds the following observation: the Reisha dafka. If you want to start with the Reisha and say that there are only three scenarios in which nisrokna applies, but giresh, there would be no nisrokna because gerushin is kakama, then if you ask me, why is it that that case of gerushin was omitted as one case of gerushin kishtika dami, right? Reisha dafka, only in these three cases, but in the case of gerushin it would be hakama, and you're asking me, what do we do with the Sefer. In other words, if Gerushin is Kakoma, then he should have mentioned it in the Sefer. And the answer is Nasiv Sefer Mishum Reisha. There's going to be a mirror image between the Sefer and the Reisha. So if you ask me, why is it that Shama Bal Begiresh is not included in the Sefer? It's one of the cases where the Av does not inherit the right to be Mefer. It's left out of the Sefer only because the Sefer is the flip side, the opposite side of the scenarios mentioned in the Reisha. For example, it says Shama v'Hefer in the Reisha, and in the Sefer it says Shama v'Kiyeh. It says Shama v'Shasak in the Reisha, and then in the Sefer it says Shama v'Shasak u'meis b'yom sheliachra. But the Brisa in the Sefer does not mention the case of Shama v'Giresh because it doesn't have a parallel opposite case in the Reisha. But the Sefer Dafka, if you want to say the Sefer is Dafka, and let's derive from the omission of Giresh Habal that in the case of Giresh Habal, we would apply Nisrokna because Gerushin is not Hakoma but rather Shtika, is then I'll tell you that Nasiv Reisha Mishum Sefer, that the omission in the Reisha, because now we're holding that Gerushin is Kishtika, and that should have been another case mentioned in the Reisha where we do apply Nisrokna. That's because in the Reisha, he doesn't mention anything beyond the opposite of the Sefer, the flip side of the Sefer. So the Gemara now wants to prove from the Mishnah that Gerushin is Kishtika. Tashma, the Mishnah said on Daf Ayin Aleph, Nadra v'hi arusa v'nis garsha v'nis arsa bo bayom afilu l'mea avia ubayla achom efir nedarim. Now, if you're going to tell me that Gerushin is Kakoma Dami, then how could another Baal inherit the ability to be made for that neder? Shmamino Gerushin Kishsika Dami, the Kakoma Dami, mi motzi mefer oros ha'achron nidre the okim oros harishon. If the oros harishon was Makayim the neder, that's the end of the story. There's no way that after his Gerushin, the second Orus could be made for the Nedarim after they were subject to Kiyum. So we have to derive from this that Gerushin is Kishsika Dami. No, the Gemara rejects it. Merely, Gerushin is Kehakama. The Mishnah mentions that the Orus HaAchron can be made fair after the Gerushin of the Orus HaRishon. That during his period of Erisin, the Orus, the first Orus, was unaware of the neder. So when he divorced her, then for sure the Gerushin is not considered Akama because he didn't even know that she had the neder. So the Gemara rejects this. If that be the case, so the Mishnah is talking about a case where the first Orus did not even hear about the neder, my area bo bayom. Why does the Mishnah tell us that it was Niskarsha bo bayom? If he didn't hear about the neder, then afilu liachar mei yomim nami. It doesn't matter. The neder would not be makuyom through his shtika, even if 100 days went by. So why wouldn't the Orus, the ha'achma, be able to be made for the nedarim, even if it wasn't bo bayom? So the Gemara rejects this and says, "Shelo shama Orus v'shama ach." It was the father who heard about the neder, and therefore it's going to have to be Nisgarsha v'nisarsa l'sheni bo bayom. Then who demotzi, then the achron could be made for. Why? Because otherwise the Yom Shamo of the Av would generate a hakama. Alomikan v'elech, from tomorrow lo motzi mefer, because since the father heard about the neder, he was not made for the neder. And therefore, by the time there was another Erison to the Sheni, the day of Yom Shamo of Av had passed, and therefore that's a Kiyum HaNeder, and there's no way that the Orus HaAchron could be made for the Neder. Toshma, let's prove that Gerushin is considered Akama from the Mishnah later on in Daf Peites. The Mishnah says, Nodra Bo Bayom. the Gersha v'chzira bo bayom. He himself divorced his wife, and on the same day he remarried her. He had a quick change of heart. And the Mishnah is going to tell us, Ein yochel lahofen. He no longer can be mefer her nedarim. Why? If he remarried her on the same day, then it's still Yom Shama. Why can't he be mefer it? Shema, the only answer to that is Gerushin Kakoladam. He was Makayim the Neder through his Gerushin, and now he cannot be mefer the Neder. And the Gemara rejects. Amri, really, in truth, Gerushin is Kishtika. Why can't the Baal, when he remarries his wife, be mefer? Her husband was mefer her nedarim without the father. There was no father because she's in a surah. Now we understand. Hainu time day yochel lahafer. After he remarries, he can't be mefer. He cannot be mefer the neder. Why? Mishum the ein Baal mefer b'kodmin. The halacha is that if a woman had nedarim before she got married, then with his marriage, the Baal does not have rights to be made for the neder. That's called kodmi. And here, the very moment that he divorced her, it completely wipes everything off. Again, even though the neder was taken while he himself was married to her, but Oda Tachta in the Surah Mishon. But nevertheless, the Gerusher Yotzam Shuso, Ukfar Butler's Chuso, Lagabi Afara, he doesn't have, he forfeited his Chus Afara, and Einer Mischadesh's Chuso, Elarak B'Nesuin Ashnir. So that's Ayin Beis Omer.